questions like this. And the question is, what do you think about Play framework as compared to Java EE? So Play framework is a mix of Scala and Java framework, I would say. So it is actually, you can mix easily Java and Scala. And what's nice in Play is it just supports really well RESTful configuration. And the most interesting part is the configuration is type safe. So what actually means is you can, it is actually, the configuration is Scala code. So this is, and Scala is a type safe programming language. So it's really nice. So, and so how to compare to Java EE? So I would say Play is interesting, but I would say Java EE is also very productive. And you cannot compare Play to Java EE. Yeah, you could actually, because Play is one of the few frameworks which comes with an alternative HTTP stack. So it isn't actually based on serverless, I think. So they have an own HTTP stack. So it is actually the I would say an alternative. As an alternative, really interesting, and I would say at least consequent, because if you choose Play, you get the entirely new stack. It's a lot better than using already Java EE server and then using other framework on top of Java EE, which in my eyes doesn't make any sense. But Play could make sense. My complaints are with the build SBTs. I had really bad experiences with compiling performance of Scala and Maven build. So most of my projects are Maven, and I had to integrate this. And it's actually also the reason why I removed Scala from X-Ray. I used lots of Scala tests. The syntax was nice, but it took just too long. So so this is basically my opinion. So I would use this, but I would say I'm also productive with Java EE. And the second argument is, I often heard that Java EE is heavyweight in development. I think I recorded so many videos, so it is what is actually heavyweight. So it is very thin, servers are small, runtime is small, you don't need a lot of heap, and the turnaround cycles are fast if you are reasonable. So reasonable means you are not deploying the whole universe just Java EE. And the next is also interesting. Internet startups uses other framework stacks like Play, Rails, or Meteor. It's so funny. I had some chats with Rails developers, and they told me that actually Rails is no more as excited as it was before, and they expect many Rubyists moving away from Rails because it just works. There's no more exciting. Meteor is something more exciting. Meteor is like it runs on Node. But I would say, Java EE, also what means startup? So if you're building, single page applications with, I don't know, like a table reservation or something like this, it doesn't actually matter what you are using, I would say. But if you are building real-time web applications like chats, videos, or whatever, then Node.js could be interesting. But we also have in Java EE Avatar, it's like Node.js implementation, which runs on Java. So you could use this as well. And what I actually wanted to say is in this year and the year before, I got lots of requests from actually startups, and which chosen Java EE because of productivity, and not only in Germany. And the recent startups I can talk about, because it's going to be published by a fellow Arun Gupta. So Arun Gupta blog. This is his blog, and he made an interview with one of my clients. And let's see, it was something like this. And this is actually one of my clients. And I will also interview this project on my blog. It's called TippyCamp, as a great business idea, actually. And the funny story is, it is a very small team. They are extremely productive. They started a prototype actually in a train. And we met from time to time and answered the questions. And all my suggestions were just simplification. And they were actually amazed how productive Java EE and JSF are. So they really wanted to use JSF. And and the landing page, you can just look at this. In my eyes, this is a full stack Java EE application running on Glassfish or Whitefly. Now on Whitefly, we started with Glassfish. And yeah, it's an amazing app. And this is one of my current clients. And more of such clients are going to be introduced by Arun Gupta in a session during the Java one. And I will also ask for interviews by them, because I got lots of questions to know, is anyone using Java 8? The problem with me is in larger company has lots of NDAs, so it's not as easy to talk about. But pages like this, there's a small team, it is a lot easier to ask them, can I just mention you somewhere? And this is the first one, and stay tuned. I will publish lots of startups actually running on Java 6 and Java 7 and Java 8. So, and they are absolutely happy. So actually, I told them you can do, the front end because they have RESTful services already. You can just create AngularJS or whatever you like. And no, we are just stick with JSF because we are productive enough. So I don't know whether I'm concerned. And also on that note, why actually the startups I'm using are using, I have to go back to my questions. Why the startups are using new technologies at all? I think in Silicon Valley and in California, it's really hard to find developers. So I think, and Java doesn't have to have a good reputation, because over the XML and patterns, what we did in the past, many young developers thinking Java devs are crazy and I don't know, they building boring Hello World application with 500 layers, which sometimes is even true. And I think if they say, let's do the application with Play, Rails, Meteor, or whatever is the next big thing, you will find easier developers. I think this is one of the reasons. There's nothing reasonable behind this. So this is actually, my thinking. Of course, there are always special cases, but in general, Java is as crazy productive as any other platform if you are just reasonable. So I hope this is answered. There's actually no feedback, so it means question answered. On that note, Sebastian Basner asked me, what is the use case for exploding framework landscape and pro and con of such frameworks? I would say with frameworks, I actually don't care about frameworks. I first care about the business logic or domain. And sometimes if you're implementing applications, you bump into problems or challenges. And what I always do is I search for the solution in JDK first, Java SE first. Then I expand the search to Java EE because most of the application servers are running application servers by Java EE apps. And if I don't find the answer there, I will expand my search to frameworks, GitHub or whatever. And then I will try to find a framework which is as popular as only possible, because then I have to argue less with architects about my decisions. So this would be my approach. So usually most of my applications don't have any frameworks, and the startups I mentioned earlier, they are also very, very lean. So this is actually, any questions? No questions. Everyone is happy. So let's do the next question. What would be the proper approach to read a network file in a J2E environment? To read a network file, I don't know what network file is. I think somewhere a file on a network. So you can perfectly open client socket to read the file. And what you shouldn't do, you shouldn't open a server socket, which is actually not required if you would like to read the file. And such question is somehow suspicious. What's really interesting is why it is actually prohibited in the programming model of HBase to read a file at all. And the answer is there are the same reason as in cloud environments. This is actually the reason why most of the cloud instances actually stateless. So if you even would read a file, if your Amazon image crashes or Heroku or whatever, it will just lose all your state. So most of the clouds are stateless, and There's also a new buzzword called immutable infrastructure, what means actually you can reboot the application multiple times. You always get the same state, and it's a read-only state. And back to the question, what is the best way? The best possible way is to use somehow sockets, and the easiest possible way would be to go over HTTP and use, for instance, JAX-RS client to read the file. That would be the best possible case, if not raw sockets. If it doesn't work, RMI would be also my choice, remote method invocation. So you will have to start a server somehow. A bad idea would be to access the file directly, because then you will have to rely on something else which replicates the files behind their cluster nodes. Okay, covered. No questions? No questions? Everyone is happy. This is really, really nice. So next question, open extended persistence context in view, a new pattern. This is actually a really a good question I got. We have extended entity manager. And what extended entity manager is, it is injected entity manager with the persistence context called extended. What it actually means, it is not closed after a transaction. So all the entities stay attached during the HTTP session. And open view pattern is the following, that you are opening the entity manager before an HTTP request and closing the entity manager after the HTTP request. This is the open context something in view pattern. And this is a mix of both. And this is actually a really interesting idea. So the question is, we could actually inject the extended entity manager to, let's say, servlet filter, perform the HTTP call, and after the call, close the entity manager, which, not close the entity manager. It doesn't actually matter, but because everything remains open. And it will absolutely work. The only problem is how to get a reference to the entity manager. So as always, we have two possibilities, and the pattern is, I described the pattern is context holder. So we have to hold the context somewhere. We can store the entity manager in a thread local, which is actually a bad idea because you have to deal with thread local by yourself and you have to think about closing it. Or you could expose or produce the entity manager with at produces, CDI produces, and I would even use a qualifier to make it distinguishable from other entity managers. And I think you could use just at extended qualifier. You will have to create such a qualifier by yourself. And why extended? Because, I mean, there will be no surprises, right? And then you could inject this entity manager whenever you like in the application. So what it actually means, you could use, you can introduce a servlet filter and make any web framework except Play, because it's not HTTP based, not servlet based, but any servlet based framework like Struts, JSF, or ViewRaptor or whatever, and make an extended entity manager injectable everywhere. And provide Vardin would also work, and provide a really object-oriented view to the domain objects. So I think this is a nice idea, and what you will save is the ability, you will make the entity manager universally injectable. But similarly, what you can also do is to implement an entity manager. Or inject the entity manager in a session scoped stateful session bean. And so the bean will be also attached to the session and expose the entity manager that way. So it would also work. So it doesn't have to be a servlet filter. It could be, but again, it's a mix of both pattern. Servlet filter will make the entity manager usable before the request gets to the web framework. If you are doing this in a EJB, it's a little bit later, but actually a really nice idea. Okay, I think questions? No questions here. No questions here. Open session in view in Spring Hibernate. Perfect. Okay. Open session in view. Yes, this is the original name. Open session in view. Thank you, Roman. I think this is one of the airhacks attendee and prior attendee of airhacks. So thank you for helping me here. And so the next question is ID generation in cluster, how to deal with this. And the question, so the best, so I think the best possible case would be use something which does not rely on a shared state. This would be the best possible way. And in Java actually comes with this. It's called UUID. So if you're using UUID, it does not depend on a certain node. It is available since JDK 1.5. It always works. The problem is a little bit slow. So if you are generating a lot of UIDs, you really have to measure the performance. This is always a good idea. Perform some stress tests or something like this. So this would be the first idea. If this is a case of something like a sequence, the next possibility is, of course, using sequences, database sequences, and then you have to rely on a central database. And of course, there could be also some performance impact because all the nodes will compete for the next slot. So this is why Hibernate, Eclipse Link, and all the other JPA persistence frameworks have in-memory sequences. So what they do is they check a block of IDs at once, let's say each 1,000 IDs, and then each node would iterate within this the block until it's exhausted, and then just ask the database again to get the next 1,000. So you will get holes if the server crashes, of course. This would be also an interesting point. Or use HA singletons. HA singletons, what it actually means is a proprietary implementation of Whitefly or JBoss. We used actually in 2003 already in our project. And how it works is, it works that way that you will have one node which is a master and many slaves. And the master is the only singleton in a cluster, and all other slaves are waiting for master to be killed by something. And the next slave is going to be elected as a master. So the fastest slave will win. And then you can continue with the generation. So this is how JBoss deals with that. WebLogic, several years ago, they had something like called, I think, pinned object. What it actually was, you could pin a singleton to a node. So you get a cluster-wide singleton, and you can also iterate within the IDs. But again, it is a little bit problematic because, cap theorem and stuff like this. If you really would like to have shared state in a cluster, you will have to rely on something like XA transaction, a two-phase commit, and it not always works well. So this is actually the problem. I think you of course could use Hazelcast and stuff like this, but it always boils down is either you will create the ID from some entropy in the system and hope that it is unique, or you can just ask Hazelcast to have a cluster singleton and ask Hazelcast, for instance, to generate a cluster-wide ID. And also the next question would be why you need ID at all. Probably you could just steal some ideas from Git, for instance, and create the ID from the contents. This would be also a nice idea. This is what happens in most NoSQL databases, actually. So they are using consistent hashing, I think is the name, and just derive the ID from the contents. Okay. Any questions? No questions. No questions. Great audience. So I think this time we will manage to be faster than 60 minutes. So this is also very, very interesting. State computation, daily limits, scalability, and consistency. So all the explanation of the points is on the gists and GitHub. So it's just the essence of the question. And the question is they have somehow daily limits to be computed from a table. How to do this? And we had similar problems in my project. So what we did, we have a table with some limits. And everyone asked it. The table was updated and asked at the same time, and this became a bottleneck. And this was some account information, as was money. And so the problem is, of course, if you're updating the table over and over again in multiple threads, it doesn't scale very well. This is actually the problem. And what we did, we changed the design that way, that instead of modeling the state, we modeled the transactions. So we have something like a journaling table, which all the transactions. And what we could do, we could just compute the limits at any time. So it took us some CPU cycles, to compute the limit. but we had no contention if we wrote to the table. So it was very scalable, but not as consistent. And you can have also mixes that you can say, okay, every 10 transactions, I'm computing the state and keeping the state somewhere, a temporary state. And if you are, at certain limit, you could recompute the state, for instance. This would be also a nice solution. And this is actually, everything boils down to cap theorem. Actually, of course, no shameless plug. This is what we discuss in the architecture Java workshops in Munich. Half a day, discussing all such problems. But it boils down that either you would like to log or just have, write-only table. If you have write-only table, you will have to reread the table to compute the state or limits or whatever. And you can also have, mixes of both. Okay, fifth question. Great. Questions? Working with HBase through Entity Manager. This was a nice question from the chat from AOI. And I have no experience with HBase. This is actually this question. But it works well with Cassandra. It works well with how it's called, the database, with MongoDB, and would also work with MongoDB, Cassandra, and everything which is supported by OGM from Red Hat. So OGM, Red Hat. So they support lots of NoSQL databases, Infinispan, of course, MongoDB, Neo4j, and Eclipse Link NoSQL support. They also support some databases. And of course, they are third party. So, and what they support is Cassandra, Google, CouchDB, MongoDB as well, but there is no HBase. And there is Data Nucleus, which comes with lots of plugins for, but there is no HBase, I think. It is HBase. So I never tried this, but try this to play with Data Nucleus, whether you can plug via JPA to HBase. And as you can see, API supported JDO, JPA REST, so it should work. I never tried that in a project, and this is recent actual implementation, as you can see, June 2014. So no experience, but it could work. And by the way, Data Nucleus is also used, I think, by the Google Cloud App Engine for Bigtable. So chat, are you satisfied? Hopefully. The only problem with all the NoSQL entity manager mappings are, of course, joins and transactions, because most of the NoSQL databases are not transactional. So you will have to manage, the transactions somehow manually, or usually what happens, you are grouping the actions and sending them at once to the NoSQL store or NoSQL store. Okay, nice. No questions. Perfect. Next one. Is JSF compatible with Bootstrap? Of course. So I actually showed this in one of the recent airhacks, and what JSF comes with. JSF HTML5 markup. Let's see whether I will find this. This is actually, this is what I wanted to see. What you can do in the recent JSF version, you can just use you can just use you can reverse the markup and use HTML5 as the main markup and just annotate it with the JSF ID, and then you have full control what actually gets passed to the backend. So this is, and if you have IDs and classes, you can use Bootstrap, Foundation, whatever you like to skin JSF pages. Of course, if you're using something like prime faces, rich faces, or whatever, you will have to see if you would like to use the components from prime faces or rich faces. You of course have to check out first which classes and IDs are exposed at all, and whether it is possible to map Bootstrap classes to these classes. But if you are using vanilla JSF in Java 7, you can absolutely do this. And by the way, there's also think, yes, this is what I wanted to see. So there is styling simplification with prepend ID. It is actually an old feature, but not widely used. What you can do, you can use here the prepend attribute false and true. If you use prepend ID false, all the auto-generated IDs are passed as such without prepending, the ID from the form. And unfortunately, default is true. No, unfortunately, it has to be that way because it has to be unique. So I actually forgot to pass the links to chat, so I will pass it. So you can just look at this afterwards. So I think we covered this. Because we have absolute control over markup, we have also control over classes and IDs, and so we can use Bootstrap. Oh, this was funny. So actually, I wrote a post about JSF being a nice markup engine, and it is really easy to use, to integrate JSP's Java Server pages, not JSF, with Java 7. I got, I don't know how many comments, but lots of comments. And I actually, you see, this is the whole discussion, and the answer, the response was like, who needs JSP? Just use Angular, whatever. But the problem is, if you are using just HTML5 with CSS and JavaScript, the problem is that what could happen is that the rendering in the browser becomes too slow, because if you're just sending, a blank page and constructing everything in the browser, it gets too slow. So what we did several times, we pre-generated the static page using JSPs with Angular, and then used, I would say, JSP as a static page generator, and then Angular with JavaScript just used the RESTful API. So what I wouldn't recommend, of course, is using forms in JSPs and processing this on the server. This is terrible. But JSP as a markup language is really great, and even lambdas are supported. I think it was hidden gem. Yes. If you look at this, you could use such expressions within JSPs. It might sound crazy, but it is a really powerful markup to find elements or whatever. And it comes out of the box the same actually expression language as it is the case in JSF. So we just posted to chat as well. So here is it. No questions. Perfect. And I lost my questions again. So I think we covered this one. So I think you should be more creative. So you could just use JSP, to use, for instance, you have a page with combo box and lots of countries, whatever. You can just pre-generate everything on the server instead of sending an empty combo box to the client, and use AngularJS to pre-populate the combo box, for instance. So this would be what could be done easily on credit cards or whatever. You can just pre-generate this on the server and then mix and match this with AngularJS, Ember.js or whatever. And because with JSPs you have absolute control over HTML5 is a really great technology. And I think it will also come back. So it is somehow quiet because it was widely misused. Why widely misused? There are many using scriptlets and whatever, and put all the Java code within the JSP, which is actually a really bad hack. And this comes over and over again, these questions. I got several times in different variations. So what I always say is just go with a war, and I said it for ages actually, since I hope 2009, since the advent of Java 6. I repeated this actually on every conference and Java user group meeting and even my blog. And the question is, okay, but the war can be huge, and what boils down is, okay, what is actually a war, right? And it's also a topic from the architecture days. So there is a Conway law, and what the Conway law actually says is the structure of a company is getting reflected in software. So if the company has 2 departments, you will get probably 2 modules, because most of the companies are run that way that the departments do not like each other. So you always need a boundary between the departments. So what it actually would mean in Java E, so you will end up having 2 wars. Now the question is how big is a team? And from the Java E perspective, Java or productivity perspective, I would argue as small as possible. 1 to 5 developers. And if you have such a team, the war is not going to be huge. And what you should also do, sometimes you get somehow independent pieces, which independent means cohesive pieces from independent parts, domain parts, like invoicing and customer relations, for instance, something like this. Then you can introduce the wars. But what do I do then? I only need RESTful web services to communicate between the wars. There is no binary coupling. So this is actually the deal. So you can introduce so many wars you like, but there is no binary coupling between the wars. And I think 3 years ago, I mentioned that on either it was 33 Degrees conference, or it was the other one in Warsaw. There was two huge 30 degrees, and the next one is the Geekon, the Geekon conference. One of those that you should just deploy one war per JVM. I think it was about 3 years ago. And what I find out recently, what I talk about are actually microservices. So you can call it whatever you like. And because for me, microservices doesn't mean anything, I started to rename this. So I delivered a talk about nano services, pico services, and the next one would be femto services. And I don't care about the services. So the idea is war should be as small as possible. War communicate with each other with RESTful web services. And there is a one war per node, per application server domain in Glassfish or Whitefly. This is actually what we do in my projects right now. There's always exceptions from the rule, of course, but this is what I would start with. Okay. I hope it is clear. Again, at Effective Java or Architecture Day, we spend a lot of time discussing exactly this point. Okay. Now, question from the chat. There is my controller show model, whether they can put the method. The question from the Igniter or JavaFX or Afterburner, whether the dialog can be a model. I think so, because the answer is I think so, because you have the access to the parent and the node itself, so you can do whatever you like. And from the application, from the main method, you have access to the stage as well, so it could be model as well. So it should actually work, because just look at the method from the fxml view, and you can override everything in the if the recent versions Afterburner 1.6 I made all the methods, I think, protected, so you can override whatever you like. So it should be possible. Okay. Also interesting question: commercial versus free tool, and this is actually the gist. We'll pass it to the chat. There are lots of discussion and comments, what I really appreciate. So, and the gist there was from, I think, No White. So and what Noah White said is that commercial tools are still valuable, and I would argue absolutely. So what I have I bought today the renewal of WebStorm license. I have IntelliJ commercial, so I buy whatever commercial tools are valuable to me. And I mean, we are software developers, and there is if you are productive, you should spend the money to buy it. And this is what actually the plumbers and all the workers also do. It's not like they get the driller for free. So they just buy, and as I observe the workers, they have really decent drillers. It's not, they are not buying something which breaks the next day. So they're really awesome tools. And so now the problem. Why are, for instance, preferring still NetBeans, or even now over IntelliJ, for instance? Because in most of companies, larger companies I work for, if I would ask them to buy, the IntelliJ license, it would take, I think, several weeks, and in some projects even, the project will end until this gets approved. So there's no way, in larger companies to request something regardless how cheap it is. This is the sad story. So for me, it's a lot easier. Just use NetBeans. It's a perfect tool, and don't ask even the legal department to because there's just free tool, download and go for it, and you get 80% of IntelliJ. This is my my thing, but now it seems like even the large enterprise companies become more reasonable. And they also know several companies who just work with IntelliJ, for instance. They bought site license, also works. And but for me, it's just like NetBeans. I also use NetBeans in all my open source projects, so it also works. And in one project, we needed a tool. It was the visual designer for Eclipse. I remember it was 10 years ago or something. And it cost 30 euros. And it was really very important for the project. It was a multi-million project. And it was impossible in the company to get the 30 euros. So what I did, I bought actually the license for us. I just gave the license to the developers because I couldn't stand it. So this is actually the reality in bigger shops. So free is absolutely crucial because you don't have to ask for permission, just use the tool. But as a professional developer, you should spend as much money as you as possible to be productive, and it will pay off. I hope. And most of the tools are not expensive either. So we are not talking about 100,000 of euros. Most licenses are about 100 euros, something like this, right? Or cheaper even. Okay. And on that note, someone asked, what is how to redeployment? I would just start with JRebel, for instance, and there are tools like Evolution VM, which are free, for instance. I would play with this. So it works, but this is not as, I would say, not as easier to build as, this was the question from the chat. So it's like, magic. So this is the alternative. It works, but you have to spend a little bit more time to customizing this, but just check it out. And it's also the case. Either you have time or money. If you don't have, money and you have time, so go for free. But if you have money and no time, so then just buy it. So this is what I would suggest to you. And for instance, if development were slow, I would just buy JRebel. So actually, I would just do it. So immediately. Okay, this was the this question, and the other one. Where's the gist? So, and SQL Query Generation from JP Hibernate, and the statistics. I mean, in most of the projects expose the project mappers expose the statistics using JMix, and what I usually do is just create heap dump and look at the heap dump. And there's a great tool called Memory Analyzer tool. And with commercial tools like, for instance, Hazelcast, you see everything, right? So, but if you buy the commercial license, Terracotta, the same. Even what you could do, you could buy license for, it's called the Fly Recorder and how it's called, JRocket. Not JRocket, yeah, I think it's called JRocket Monitor, which comes with Java Virtual Machine with JDK 1.8. You get exactly this the statistics, and it really depends which cache you are using. If you are using, for instance, Hazelcast or Infinispan, you get all these statistics for free anyway because they come with JMix. So most of this you get for free. So SQL Query Generation, JP and Hibernate, they are Eclipse Link just do it for free. What we use this as an input. And use then FlyWayDB, for instance. FlyWayDB. Or this is what it is in most cases. Or HBase. This is a little bit more powerful. This is the problem with this. And to generate reasonable to maintain the database, the versioning in the database, schema evolution. Yeah. Okay. I think we are fine with the question. we are not that fast today. Okay. Is mixing storage transfer concerns an anti-pattern? I saw that on Twitter, and this is a common answer I get. What I propose is just just expose the entity beans or entities to the client, and I also yeah, but we have the add entity annotation and add ID on whatever, and this is not very clean. And my counter question is, does your client cares about cleanness? Because it is like we are talking here about aesthetics. So because what you can easily do, you can extract the annotations from, or you even pass the entire JPA API to the client. It's probably 8K or something, and who cares about this? And it will probably never change because it is pretty stable in Java 6 and Java 7. And what he's talking about is was something like if we have an entity Hugo that we have here at entity and for instance XML root element, and this is the problem. Now we are mixing the persistence with the XML and of course with the business logic, because true entity is an object, and object has business logic. So also here would be some crazy complex stuff. So and the opinion is this is a bad idea, anti-pattern, and mixing this with this is also anti-pattern. So what I will argue, it is not a best practice to mix business logic with any kind of technology. It's not very clean. But what's more interesting to me is what happens in worst case if I will do it. So really, what happens in my project if I will mix the entity with the JAX-B? In worst possible case, this XML root element becomes superfluous because we need another technology, and I will have to write a script to remove everything which starts with .xml, for instance. This would be the worst possible case, which I actually don't care a lot because it would be a huge project or huge removal. What is actually the solution to the problem? The solution to the problem would be to create Hugo DTO, which looks exactly as the Hugo without the annotations. And of course, usually Hugo mapper class, which maps it, or you have to introduce another framework to do this. And so if I don't know about you, but for me, it is don't repeat yourself in code duplication is a lot worse than having some marker interfaces, which actually everything boils down to marker interfaces and passing them with the object. So the code duplication is a lot worse than just putting some annotation on the object, even if it's not very clean. And on that note, it would be even cleaner, to remove the entity entirely, and you could introduce the file called ormxml. But this is, I think, the beginning of the end, because then you have a file with metadata and which points to the class, and you have here also some duplication, and you guys get some trouble with refactoring and stuff like this. So I would say start with the simplest possible thing, even if it appears a little bit unclean at the beginning. And if you have trouble with that, then react to this. And don't use patterns proactively with the hope that one day it will pay off. So I think this is what damaged lots of enterprise Java projects, because they were just exaggerated in any direction, and none of the features were actually used in production. I hope it's clear. So this is actually really nice. This is actually the reason why I'm doing this airhacks IO, because something like this, to describe in a blog, I will get 100 additional counter comments, and it is actually impossible to describe it properly. But in interactive mode, it works a lot better and saves a lot of time. Okay. Questions? No questions here. Twitter is very quiet, which is nice. And we have lots of going on here in the chat, which is also nice. So this is nice. I got a nice comment from Brett Davis, tweet first, and this was so. This is what I really liked because it says this seems like a flaw in EJB implementation spec. It's like, oh, nice, an offending comment. So it would be, it is going to be for sure covered in the next airhack spec. But it turned out that the Brett Davis is really nice and it was not offending at all. It was just actually a very nice comment. And look at the gist. You will see, oh, the problem. So let's go to the gist. This was this one. So, and this is actually what Brett means here. And I also covered this in my blog called, let's say, Adam Bean that EJB. Hopefully, we'll find us. Self-invoke. I think this was the title. Yes, perfect. Wow, almost 3 years old. So it's Postie here, and I get a question a lot. It is like we are in the EJB, and then I say this and invoke another method, and developers often expect to start a new transaction or check the security, which actually never happens. Why not? Because the proxy is required. So if you are just using this is game over. This is this. So we are in the instance. If you would like to get, the advantage of starting transaction security, you will always have used the proxy. So what it actually means, you will have either to look up the proxy or inject the proxy, but and then use this me here instead of this. And why is this? And where is my perfect? Why is this? I will have to draw something. So we have a client, a beautiful client, and the client talks to an EJB. What the client does not know is it is not the EJB, it's actually the proxy. And the proxy talks to the EJB, and because it is transparent, the EJB inherits usually from the proxy, or the CDI object inherits from the proxy. This is actually the basic architecture, and this is called also a proxy pattern. The classic proxy pattern would also come with an interface, but basically it is an inheritance-based proxy pattern. So of course it always works because now the proxy, it doesn't call the bean directly. What the proxy does is it calls the interceptors first, which are actually aspects from AOP, and there are transaction aspects, security, and exception handling, whatever, and everything is implementing having the proxy in place. But if you are already in the instance, then it cannot work because you are in the instance, and this is this. So if you invoke the method, you are in the instance. And Brett argues that this is broken. And what I also get often is the asynchronous model. So if a method is asynchronous, it comes with asynchronous from EJB. So I get sometimes the suggestion it shouldn't be on the server, it should be from the client. So the client should decide whether the call should be asynchronous or not, which is not my opinion at all, because asynchronous means concurrency. It also means managing thread, also means monitoring. So actually the EJB should know how many threads are actually allowed or not allowed, which are robust enough, and all the throttling has to be implemented here and not on the client side. But I see the point. So this is really a discussion, and I remember we had some discussion in the EG back then about this. But I think it is fine as it is, and even my opinion would be, to expand this with a more metadata here to say max threads, I would say 5, and even enhance the common asynchronous, the current asynchronous annotation to provide more metadata. So what it actually means, some throttling, for instance. So this is, I just like how it is. For me, this is that simple. So it is really easy to explain. It is actually the classic proxy pattern. So if you are already in the instance, the proxy cannot work, but because you always have to go through the proxy. And and I have also to admit, in my projects, it is never the case that you actually have to invoke another method within the boundary, for instance. You always, if you need this, you have to introduce a control. This is actually what happens in my projects. Why it works? Because this is a server-side programming model. So it is what is not needed is, if you were building, an UI application, it will be a little bit more critical. But on the server, it's always like there is a common entry point, and the entry point dispatches the call to the services, and you are basically done. This is the basic Java EE architecture. I hope this is also covered. Yeah, no questions. So I got an interesting tweet von Bruno Borges, and he asked me about scopes in CDI on the client. So why? Because there is a framework, you cannot call it framework. It was actually a weekend hack, which became surprisingly successful. It's called Afterburner, and it provides dependency injection for JavaFX clients. And I get a lot of requests, not from the actual users, rather than competing frameworks. Shouldn't we implement scoping, like session scope, request scope, and stuff like this? Oh, something is dancing here. So we come back to the Sergio's question in a second. So and in the clients and applications, we never had the problem we never found a killer case to implement scope. So in Afterburner, for instance, everything is a singleton. It can be destroyed during testing, but basically it's a singleton. This is what we did for ages in Swing clients. I never had the need in a Swing to create, thread scope, because Swing or as JavaFX, they are never multi-threaded. So there could be some corner cases, but I think just introducing the complexity of scoping on a client side is not worth, as I don't see any advantage right now. But if you know some killer cases, then I could even implement Afterburner, but then I would probably use Weld, not do it by myself. And more interesting would be, of course, CDI events. This is what could work, but still with Java 8 and JavaFX, it just works perfectly without CDI events as well. So this is why I did not implement it in Afterburner 1.6, and the advantages is just 3 classes. Okay, I hope it is covered a little bit. So let's see. And Sergio asked me, we have wars communicated each other with REST. What it actually means, JAX or REST services. So they communicating over JSON if it's fast enough, if not optimized JSON, like for instance, serializable Java objects. And do you use separate models, databases per service? This would be the best possible case, but you cannot do it always. So to be honest, in most projects we have a shared database, because it's not always possible to create one database per service. But if you're building the application from scratch, you can design it that way that each microservice has a own store, like a file store, for instance, and I would consider it like a better file store or temp folder. And such a file store could be a database. So no one cares about the quality of, let's say, of the normalization of the database. So this is what can happen. Okay, I think we covered everything, I hope. Did we? Last chance to ask questions if we are still 1 hour. So I think it's not possible to be faster than 1 hour on airhacks. Yeah, I think we are really done. So we are really done. No questions here. No questions here. So what it means, thank you for watching. See you in October. After Java 1, actually. And what I could do, I'm thinking about this, I don't know whether it's a good idea or not, just record short, snippets from Java 1 with a really small handheld camera and a mic, just to give you a flavor of what actually happens on Java 1, and probably interview some people on Java 1. But I really don't know whether it is worth to do this. And And see you, of course. So I publish all my sessions, Java 1 sessions. They are coming soon. What I'm also doing in the next week, I'm delivering a workshop on CH Open in the Switzerland. So already 80 registrations, which is really nice. And in December this year, we have workshops. So this is the traditional airhacks. And I have to say, we have already sufficient registrations to everything. So it will take place, which is really nice. So I really appreciate this. So it seems like Java EE is really popular. And yeah, thank you for watching. And the last glance here. So everything done. So thank you for watching, and see you on one of upcoming conferences, workshops, or even airhacks. And I have some screencasts at the queue as well. So thank you again. Bye.